Hello and welcome on this wonderful but cold Thursday. And I apologize to everyone in the rest of the world because cold means nothing here in Florida compared to what a lot of people are going through. So, hopefully, everyone is staying warm. And hopefully, hey, if you can't get to a meeting because it's too snowed in or cold, you can hang out with us and chill out and talk about being sober here with us. So today we have a interesting topic, one that I have struggled with throughout my entire life, which is the topic of excessive thinking and overthinking everything and constantly thinking about stuff and then thinking about stuff and then wondering why you can't stop thinking about stuff, which is crazy. So, Terry, how you doing today? Is it freezing there in the Bay Area?
No, it's not too bad, and I'm trying not to overthink about it.
There you
It's,
go. Cool. All right, awesome. And if we can get a few people to comment and let us know how the sound check is going, that would be good. And we'll get it going from there. So, Terry, before we dive into the major stuff, what are your thoughts on overthinking? I know you were talking about a buddy of yours who's kind of overthinking stuff right now. What are your thoughts on that? What was your experience with overthinking?
well, alcohol just pretty much exacerbated my overthinking. I would overthink about what did I do last night, when I drank way too much, or overthink about what am I going to do for the future, maybe to quit drinking, or overthinking about my job and how can I keep that buzz going and still work and nobody know about it. And overthinking it was a huge issue, and alcohol just exacerbated it. The alcohol would kind of slow down my overthinking. It would kind of quell my thoughts, but
Mm-hmm.
when I woke up the next morning, it was worse. And that's what happens is
Yeah.
that the mind wakes up and it starts overthinking about things and the anxiety kicks in, and then I start worried about what's going to happen and what happened in the past instead of just living in the now. And
Yeah, for sure. Now, how did you find that alcohol messed around? Sorry, we got to get our settings right. I know we had some feedback, so we're getting it dialed in now. We should be okay. What was your experience with alcohol and excessive thinking? Because I know for me, before I got sober and throughout my entire life until I got sober, like 35 years or whatever it was, I never really knew how to manage my mind. I never really knew how to like stop thinking, stop taking stuff seriously. And when I was drinking, it was like that times a million, right? And I couldn't stop thinking no matter what I tried. So what was your experience with stuff like that?
well, same thing. Before I got sober, I hadn't learned how to manage my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I would always take my thoughts kind of captive and think that that's who I was. My thoughts were defining who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was going through life, maybe even before alcohol was a serious problem, I was always a fairly heavy drinker. If you were to, base it on a normal person,
Mm-hmm.
but but my overthinking was uh, alcohol just always would push it down. Even before alcohol was a problem, um, I it was a big problem for me. Not terrible, but as I would think about my family and what are they thinking about my drinking, and I'd think about work and what's going to happen, and
Mm-hmm.
I would tend to think about the catastrophic things that might happen in life rather than just taking it 1 minute at a time and just go with the flow. Those catastrophic things, they never happened.
Yeah.
And
Now, did you find a way out, or did drinking just kind of stop it naturally?
well, no, drinking would push it down.
No, I mean when you got sober. Sorry.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was a lot of tools that I learned to use,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. And the first thing, and the most important thing, was to stop drinking
Yeah.
and then understand that the feelings are going to come back and they're going to come back strong.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're excessive and it seems like I can't handle them. But the thing was, is I just learned to, first of all, pause
Hmm.
and try to, just live in the now, like I've already said a couple of times, but
Hmm.
pause and then understand that these thoughts are not who I am.
Hmm.
They're not what is going to happen to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, a catastrophic thing may happen, but more than likely it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And if I just work in a positive direction in my life and try to do the right thing, try to work towards a goal, and try to distract myself as far as like if these thoughts become excessive, try to do something else like go on a bike ride. I don't
Yeah.
really sit and meditate. That's a tool that a lot of people use,
Hmm.
but I go on a hike or walk my dog or do something like that. Go into a movie.
Hmm.
Things like that are seem to be what's helped me get over the excessive thinking and anxiety that it causes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people struggle with this. And for me, when I struggled, it was bad. Like throughout my whole life, I always struggled with thinking. I would, date someone in high school, and I have obsessive thoughts all the time. And I'd, get a new job, and I'd have obsessive thoughts about that. Or business, I got obsessed with it and thought about it 24/7. And I couldn't drive down the road or watch TV without, oh, hey, that's a business idea. Hey, this is a business idea. And it was very, very excessive, and I couldn't get out of it. And when I started drinking, I kind of lost control of the ability to see my way out. So, what happens here is we have our thoughts and we have our who we are. So, let's see if we can move this over here. I think that is good. So, we have our thoughts up here, right? We'll put our thoughts here. And you might have your thoughts, whatever you're thinking about. Okay, so do this. Do this with me right now. I want everyone on this call to, if you're not driving, okay, I want you to close your eyes. If you're driving, just pay attention to the road and do this in your brain and be very careful, right? And close your eyes, and I want you to notice everything in the room. Okay, so I want you to close your eyes and I want you to notice everything in the room. So for me, I'd close my eyes and I'd say, okay, I notice the heater sound. I notice the lights coming in. I notice the way my body feels. I notice my breath. I notice a lot of things, right? My breathing activity, everything like that. So I want you to do that for about 30 seconds. Okay. Again, if you're driving, do not close your eyes, please. We don't need that. So everyone do this. Okay. And after you've done it, type 30 in the comments box. Okay. So do that. And I want you to kind of think about what's going on around you and notice what's going on. Be mindful of all the stuff around you. And I'll give you guys 30 seconds to do that. And luckily, I have a clock here. So start now. All right. And I think that was about 30 seconds. Open your eyes. Now, I want you guys, if you guys did that, type 30 in the box. So we're going to test this out on Terry. So Terry, what did you notice? What were the things that were going on around you?
Let me see. I noticed, well, first of all, I noticed my dog snoring on the
Mhm.
floor next to me.
Mhm.
I noticed that I was, shaking my leg.
Mhm.
Nervous energy, I guess. Too much
Mhm.
coffee, something like that.
Mhm.
The lights on my
Mhm.
eyelids, noticed that. My
Okay.
breathing.
Okay, and you guys can type in what you noticed as well. And what I want to kind of bring up in this point is that if you did that exercise, you didn't really do the exercise. Because what happened is you were thinking about what was going on. So if Terry is thinking about his dog snoring, he's not actually experiencing it, right? He's just thinking it. You're naming it. And throughout life, we go through and we put little labels on everything that we see. This is the way that we're born. This is the way language works. This is the way human thought is made, right? One of the most interesting things to me is what was thought like before language, right? Interesting. Maybe it was like pictures or maybe it was something else. We don't know because I don't remember being one. So I don't know. But that's really what happens. So we have that going on, and that's what happens in our mind. So we have our thoughts here, and our thoughts are constantly describing and trying to make meaning out of everything. So you have this thinker, and it has this language. Okay, and language, pardon my spelling, language is what gives us the ability to process thoughts, right? We're going through and we're like, okay, that's a heater. This is this. There's 30 people here. There's this. Terry's over there. I got to watch out for the lights. I keep bumping into this, right? That's what's going on is we're describing everything that we're seeing, that we're experiencing. Okay, so we have the language there. And then what happens is our mind goes through and it tries to make meaning. Okay, so we go through and we're like, okay, I want to make meaning out of this. Okay, this, if you're a text message person, you'll see this like on steroids. Not literally steroids, but it gets really crazy, right? And it tries to make meaning of everything. You go through and you get a text and it says, honey, gonna be late. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean she's cheating on me? Does that mean, they gotta work late? Does that mean she got a flat tire? What does that mean? Right? And our brains are constantly trying to make meaning of everything going on around us. Just like yesterday when it was really cold and everyone was freaked out saying, well, global warming can't be real because it's cold. And we're trying to make meaning out of things that don't have meaning. And we all know that it's not exactly how global warming works, but we're trying to make meaning of the cold. We're trying to make meaning of the text. We're trying to make meaning of everything that's going on in our world. And what it all leads to is the idea and the illusion of control. So we have this illusion of control. And the control says, well, if I know what that means, then I can do this. So we have people on the chat. We have William saying, well, I noticed that my life sucks. Well, I would say in reference to what? In reference to what? Because I could look back at times in my life and say, well, did that suck or did that not? Did it suck that I go through that, or was it good that it brought me to something else? And our minds are constantly looking for this meaning. So we have our thoughts, which produce a language. And for someone like William, he might say, well, I lost my job, okay? You have a thought. Lost my job. Turns into language. You look for meaning. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that my life sucks, and that means I don't have skills, or that means that the job didn't want me, or whatever it is, and that means I'm going to go broke, which means you don't have control, okay? Now, in our lives, we have the illusion of control. Okay, you really can't control anything. Nothing. You can't control anything, right? That's why the Serenity Prayer is so good, because there's certain things we have the illusion of control. Like I can control my car on the highway, but I can't control what anyone else does. Some guy comes up and boom, I can't control that. So, same kind of thing goes on. Now, what does this have to do with excessive thinking? Well, if we can look at this process here, right? If we can look at the process of thinking and say what's going on, because there's two things at play. One thing at play, I'll get a different color here. One thing at play is content. Okay, content. Now the content is what we're thinking about. I notice my life sucks. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I lost this job. I did this thing. I don't feel good. I want to drink, whatever. This is all content. My family sucks, my this, whatever, or everything's great. Maybe you're on the other spectrum, okay? Now, on the other side, we have what's called working, okay? The working. Now, what's the difference between the two? Well, the content is what I think about. One of my favorite quotes is by a guy named Alan Watts, and he says, if you're the type of worrying person, you can always find something to worry about. That's a paraphrase. It's not exact. His quote's a lot better. But what he's saying is that if you're the type of person that worries, you're always going to worry. If you're the type of person that's scared, you're always going to find something to be scared about. It's like those kids that are scared of the dark, right? If you remember being scared of the dark when you're a kid, you lay down on your bed, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, the devil's coming in the door, and then you hear something else, and it's like, this is coming, there's something under the bed, there's this. What that is that's the content of the mind, okay? The content is the stuff, the words, the thoughts. The working of the mind is how your mind works. Now, if you understand the difference between these two, and something else I'm going to talk to you about, it's going to get a lot better, because now I can look at it and say, well, when I was a kid, all this stuff happened, therefore I developed an anxious mind. Okay, you look at my past, you're like, okay, yeah, the guy had to be anxious because There's always shit happening, right? And now as an adult, I still have that working of the mind, but now I can look at it and say, well, my mind just goes fast. Like if I have a cup of regular coffee, my mind's going to go fast and it's going to work fast. It doesn't matter what the content is. It doesn't matter what the words are. It doesn't matter what's going on because that's how it works. Now, if you can understand that your mind works all the time and you can't control it, it just kind of goes and goes and goes, then you're going to realize, okay, well, that's the way it works. Yeah, I'm kind of prone to worrying about business. A guy used to tell me years ago when I had my business and we were really successful, he worked for me, and he would always call me the guy who's afraid of going under. He's like, dude, you made like $3,000 today and you're worried about going under. I think you're going to be fine. And he would say that over and over. Now, what he didn't realize is that was the working of my mind. Now, the content was the job. I could have made $5, I would have thought the same thing. I could have made 5 million, would have thought the same thing because that's the way my brain works. So if you focus on the working of your mind, how does your mind work? For example, if you have someone who is prone to depressive thoughts, that's the working of the mind. Okay, your mind's going to go low, right? The content is going to pull up all the stuff. Says, hey, why do I feel this way? Well, it's because this happened, or they broke up with me, or this happened, or, the kids aren't doing good in school, or whatever it is, you're going to have that content no matter what. So now if you can differentiate it and say, well, my mind is more or less a chemical type thing, and the working is always going to happen. I'm always going to worry. Now, Terry, did you notice that in your life where you said, yeah, okay, I can kind of notice the way my mind works? Like, this is the way there's this other dude who's happy all the time. Maybe I'm the dude who's funny all the time or sad or whatever.
Well, yeah, and I would focus on the bad things that were going to happen because, well, not because I wasn't focusing on the alcohol, but I would focus on the bad things in my life that were happening, and that was because of the alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned to do after getting sober is trying to look at life in a different perspective, in a more positive way.
Mm-hmm.
And what can I do to be a positive person? What can I do to be productive? And what can I do to stay sober? And that
Exactly.
started to make things get better. And it didn't happen all at once. It's a process, and it's something that I had to get in the habit of doing, and it's something I'm in the habit of doing is looking at life in a positive way. I wake up in the morning and I'm grateful for what I have, and I think about the things that I'm grateful for. That's one of the tools I use. Is I don't like actually write out a gratitude list, but I do think about some specific things I'm grateful for. My wife and I both do that every morning, and that helps me get started in the right direction.
Absolutely. And one thing to realize also is that alcohol affects the working of the mind.
Yep.
Just like caffeine will affect my mind and make me think really fast and kind of jittery and on edge, alcohol does the same thing. Now, for me, alcohol put me in the dumps and it made me depressed and I couldn't get out. So, what I want to go through now is kind of how this works because we got a lot of people talking in the comments about Jacob saying, hey, same with me being an angry or bitter person. And we look at that and we're like, well, are you an angry or bitter person, or is your working of mind bent towards that? Right? There's a difference between the thoughts and the thinker. Okay, so if you have the thoughts, you're like, okay, I have these thoughts, but are you the thinker or are you the observer? Because we could look at this, and when I was growing up in a heavily churched family, they would always say, take every thought captive, fight with your thoughts. And they didn't pay attention to the words like, hey, be still and know that he's God. Be still and know this, and come enter into the rest of the Lord. They didn't focus on those. They focused on the war part, which is kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe their working of mind was all about war and stuff like that. But we have to look at that and say, does that mean that I'm this person? Does that thought mean I am angry? Or does it mean this or that? Okay? Very, very important. So we got to look at that. So we have to break up the thoughts between the thinker. Now, if you want to get past this kind of stuff, it's kind of tricky, but it's really cool if you can get past it. And here's how it works, okay? The very fact that you want to stop thinking is the reason you can't. Okay, think about that for a minute. The very thought that you want to stop thinking is the reason that you can't. Okay, so if you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I want to sit here and I want to stop thinking. and I'm just going to clear my mind, and I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to, do the circle and fire, whatever it is you do, right? And you try to meditate or whatever, and you say, I'm going to clear my mind. What usually happens is you sit there and you go, okay, going to clear my mind. All right, well, what about that? What about this? What about that? And you start thinking and you start thinking. So what we need to do is we need to focus on it, because thinking cannot be stopped by thinking about it. Right? You can't stop negative thoughts by thinking about them. Oh, that was negative. I need to be more positive or whatever.
Right.
What you need to do, and what I've found works really well, is to separate, is to sit there and watch the thoughts go by, right? You have your thoughts. You have you. Here's you. Okay? And hopefully you're happy like that guy. And you have your thoughts going by, and they go by in language. Okay? So they're going by, and they're like, okay, take the dog out. Got to do this, got to pay that bill, don't have enough money for this, had an argument with spouse, whatever. And these thoughts are going by, okay? Now, you can sit and you can watch them go by, or you can pick them up and think about them, right? You could sit there, and I could sit here and I could be like, okay, the heater's over there. And I could sit and go, okay, well, the heater's off, there's a red light, and there's this. And I can actually pick it up and think about it, or I could just be like, heater, that's cool, whatever, and just kind of let it go. But the problem arises when we get into taking these thoughts, turning them into language, and then making meaning out of them, right? Because they're going to float around here, and these things are going to happen. If you hang around with a bunch of negative people, there's going to be more negative stuff in your thought river. If you are like my wife, and she likes to watch crime documentaries before bed, and then she's like, why can't I sleep? And I'm like, because you just watched about 18 people get killed, and I can't sleep either. Those are going to pop up, and you'll be like, wow, okay. Well, here we go. Now these are in there, okay? And you'll start to think about these things. And then you'll go through, and maybe there's a few happy things in there. We'll make purple happy things, all right? Now, here's the funny part about it. If you have your working of mind, and your working of mind is affected by alcohol, or it's prone to something, what's going to happen is it's going to be like a radar, right? And you're going to radar in, and you're going to be like, the working of my mind wears these purple glasses. Boop, boop. And all you're going to see in here is purple, right? You're going to be like, okay, purple, everything's good, everything's bad, whatever it is, you're going to pick up those thoughts. Now, what happens is we try to control this, but it doesn't work so good. That's why the best method that I've found is that look at the mind as, hey, it's a good servant, but it's a bad master. Right? It's a good servant. You could sit there and you could be like, okay, my mind needs to think about this, or I need to think about this. And you could go through, or you could sit there and be like, my mind's in control. Like when I was drinking and when I was dealing with this stuff really bad, I had a war with my brain every day. It's like, why don't I think this way? What's wrong with me? Why can't I get this under wraps? And I realized that the best thing to do is to release control. That's one of the things I really can't control. I can't sit and control my thoughts. Right. I can let them pass. I can surrender to them, but I can't sit and control them. Does that make sense to you, Terry?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I try to do is just let the thoughts be and not worry about them.
Mm-hmm.
That's simple.
Let's see what some other people are saying in here as well. Katie says, the illusion of control in context makes sense, but don't you agree that there are things you can control, such as your own car, the highway, what clothes you wear? Yes, those things, I mean, to some extent you can control, but those aren't really the things you think about all day, I don't think, right? I hope not. Maybe you do, but either way, yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Terry?
Yeah, I just try to control only the things that I have control over and not worry about what other people. I mean, that's a serenity prayer right there. Grant me the serenity to control the things I can, and you know that's what it's all about. It's not worrying about what other people are doing, and hopefully knowing the difference.
Yeah, and realizing that thoughts aren't as serious as we make them. Like I know people, and I've dealt with a lot of people with OCD myself. I've had real bad bouts of OCD, and sometimes you'll obsess about a thought you had, thinking that it means either I'm good or I'm bad, right? I remember in church, it was like, hey, and a funny thing about thoughts is like the place you're not supposed to think weird things is always where you do, right? So you go sit in church and you're like, why am I thinking about that? I'm supposed to be pay attention to the sermon and I'm thinking about, some stupid thing or whatnot. or I'm in AA and I can't stop thinking about drinking, or I think about this or whatever. And it's interesting because we can accept the fact and we can surrender that our mind is made up of lots of words, lots of thoughts, lots of input has come in. We've been affected by our culture, our upbringing. We've been affected by our language. We've been affected by the things that have happened to us and everything like that. And we got to focus on that and say, okay, well, if I can take the working of the mind and I could surrender to it, like right now, I could sit here and I could say, well, my mind's prone to it. For example, if I have a giant cup of regular coffee, my mind's going to go crazy. And I'm going to think all kinds of weird things. I can be like, what's going on? Now, I can dive into those. And I could be like, okay, well, yeah, this and this and this is bad and this is good and this here. Or I could sit there and say, well, I had a cup of coffee. Of course, I'm going to think that way, right? Very important to realize. Same thing with alcohol. Alcohol is going to affect the way that your thought process works. So let's take some of the questions and see where we're at with this. I know it's a little bit of a different topic, but yeah, let's see. Jacob has a good one. He said, heard someone say that what you resist persists. What you resist comes back more. Exactly. It's kind of the, was it the, some kind of model. I forgot what it was. It was the model of like wanting something you can't have, which makes you want it even more, right? It's like putting a no fishing sign up. The fishers are going to go there and be like, well, it's got to be a good place to fish. We'll try it out, when they probably wouldn't try it if there was no sign there, making us desire what we resist or what we can't have.
Absolutely. And with alcohol, that was especially the case for me, is
Mm-hmm.
the more I would think about not drinking, the more I'd find myself walking to the liquor store to get alcohol. It's just that vicious circle.
And that's probably why the surrender part works so good. Like, I surrender to the fact that drinking's not a good idea. I surrender to the fact that drinking doesn't work for me, or however you want to put it, because you're now surrendering to it and saying, well, yeah, obviously I'm going to think about it because I drank, 20 drinks a day for however many years. That's a lot of drinks. That's going to pollute my thought pond quite a bit. And when you pair those with things that feel good, feel bad, you're going to get the move towards or move away from. Right? If I have something that feels bad, I'm going to tend to move away from it. If I have
Right.
something that feels good, like, hey, drinking sometimes shuts the thoughts off, drinking sometimes helps, you're going to go towards it. But as we found out, drinking does not help at all. It actually makes it worse.
Right.
So let's take a couple other comments in the box there.
Well, Denise said, I heard you can look at your thoughts like a car going by in traffic. And definitely that's what we've been kind of talking about, is just not taking them captive and keeping the thoughts just as thoughts. They're not who you are. They're not what you're going to do. And yeah. Um,
Exactly.
what else we got? We don't have a lot of comments. Come on.
No, yeah. If you usually we have way more. If you guys have comments on the topic, let us know where you're at. I know it's quite a bit to digest what we went over, but I think it's really important to look at, because oftentimes we get people in life, myself, I'm sure Terry's done it, where you try to divide your mind. And you're like, okay, the way to stop thinking is to divide my mind into the one that's thinking about all the stuff and the one that's relaxed. But the problem is you're still in your thoughts. And that's what I mean by thinking can't be stopped by thinking about it. You really have to get there and say, I'm going to surrender. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to surrender to the fact that I'm going to think. There's going to be thoughts going by. But the key is not to attach yourself to anyone, not to pay mind to it, right? Not to pick it up and say, okay, well, like she says with the car thing, right? There we go. We got the car. It's a red car. It's got this. It's transmission. It's got a Hemi. It's 400 horsepower, whatever. Instead of doing that, just say, well, there's a red car, right? Very important to look at. Let's take a couple others here. I think some others came in.
Well, a couple people talked about, Kane said, sounds a bit like mindfulness, is it? And KB Archer said mindfulness, but it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, mindfulness is important in sobriety. But it's not like I have to, and I had to go through a learning process to learn this, and I'm still learning as I go, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not like I have to constantly think about sobriety. I think about what I'm going to do today towards sobriety. I do things for sobriety every day, but it's not like it's on my mind constantly. When I was
Yeah.
drinking, alcohol was my focus 100% of the time. Everything revolved around it. It's and everything revolved around all the repercussions of drinking, like hiding the drinking, trying to figure out how I'm going to go to work, and just all the things that go around it, the legal repercussions of things I did.
Mm-hmm.
And in sobriety, I'm able to focus more on what I'm going to do today. I'm walk my dog, ride the bike. I have to go to work. Work's a little heavy right now, but it's okay because
Yep.
it's work. That's all right.
Yeah, and I think also one of the things that I notice that's similar between your sobriety and mine is the fact that we consciously decided to change what happened in our thought pool. Right,
Right.
we had the thought pool going on, and at that point, we had the glasses that were like the beer goggles, so to speak, and all we saw was alcohol, and it was like, I got to live by this, I got to think about it, and it consumed probably 18, 20 hours of my day. And when I got sober, I decided to consciously put different things in my mind. And over time, these things will start to change. It's kind of like my family, we do movie quotes and we laugh about everything. Best time we have, just laughing about everything. And the reason I'm able to do the movie quotes and the funny things and whatever, and the reason my kids are able is because that's how we trained our brain, right? That's what we saw. Those are the things that we radared in on. Other people, they might see analytical stuff and they focus on the analytical. And the cool thing about that is you can change it. Like if my family grew up watching sad movies all the time, we probably wouldn't laugh. We'd probably cry a lot more. And the same kind of thing with your life. Whatever you put in your mind, right? Whatever you're consuming, whatever's the input is going to affect that pool, right? And then you put the working on top of it, put some alcohol on top of it, and you got a recipe for disaster because you're not living by design. You're not sitting there saying, well, I planned my brain to be this way. Now, when I got sober, one of my things that I did is I listened to a talk every day. Right? I listened to a talk by Ram Dass. I listened to a talk by Alan Watts. Last night I was listening to Osho, who's kind of good, but his voice will drive you nuts. So if that bugs you, he has this thing where he extends every S. So he's like, today's, and you're like, dude, stop. But if you can get past it, you'll like him. And again, that's my mind zeroing in on
Yep.
something, you know? And when I relax and I say, you know what? So the dude has long S's, big deal. Let's listen to it anyway. And I listen to these tapes every day, and it literally changed the way that I thought. It changed what was in the thought pool because the old thought pool was, marriage is bad, gotta leave, gotta stay. This is bad, work is bad, bad. A couple of funny things, but mostly bad. What am I gonna cook? Those were the things that were in my pool. Now I notice if I put these other things in my mind, those thoughts go with me, right? Because you can take and you could get thoughts from wherever and put them in your pool, and those are going to be what you're going to be have available to choose from, right? So what we want to do is we want to do like we do in sobriety, where it's like what we know gives us options. Okay, what's in your thought pool gives you options, but what you do keeps you sober or keeps you sane. So what I know is in my thought pool. I'm going to listen to tapes. I'm going to put some good stuff in there. I'm going to start thinking about good things. I'm going to start looking at the positive. I'm going to do like Terry and his wife, and I'm going to think about the good things, the gratitudes in the morning, right? And these things start to change what's down here in the thought pool. And pretty soon, Terry's like, well, I really want to be angry right now, but there ain't nothing to be angry about in my thought pool. Like, there's only good shit in there, right? And that's what you're going to find, and it'll start to change your perspective from everything's happening to me to I am part of this world. I'm 1/8 billionth of this world, or 1.7.5 billion, whatever the number is, and I'm just going. And life happens to everyone. Like, there's someone right now that's like, I'm in Wisconsin and I can't believe it's so cold because I can't go to work and I can't do this and I can't do that. Well, the whole country's cold. It's not just you. And life isn't just happening to you. Life is happening and you're part of it. And you can look at it and you could say, well, I'm glad to be a part of it. This is awesome. Or you could look at it and say, well, I want more. I want this. I wish I had. And when you have that desire, right? And the desire is the root of your suffering. And if you look at it and say, well, I'm gonna start to load up my thought pool with different things. I'm gonna start to load up my thought pool. If you lose a job, I'm gonna load up my thought pool with maybe business stuff or maybe a skill for a new job. If you're drinking, I'm going to load up my thought pool with tools to help me get sober. That way, when the thoughts go by, instead of 800 thoughts about drinking and 5 about being sober, now you got 800 about being sober and 5 about drinking. And I know for Terry and myself, we look at it and that's a game changer. Like being able to look at it and say, I don't think about drinking all day. I don't think about this stuff, right? And what is that like for you now, Terry?
Exactly. I don't think about drinking all day.
Mm-hmm.
I do one or two things every day for my sobriety, and that's about it. And but I go through life in a positive way. I just started working at a hotel company that I worked for 5 years ago. I walked out on that job because of my drinking. I just left. I tried to get hired again like a year later, and they said no, and I just got hired. And there's a lot of the same things. I went in there and I'm just shaking my head because it's the same stuff that's going on now in that corporate hotel world
Mm-hmm.
that was happening back then. But I'm
Yeah.
able to look at it from a much different perspective because of my thought pool. I have a more positive outlook on life. I know what I can control. I don't worry about what the other guys are doing that's going to affect my job. I don't worry about it. I just try to deal with it and go in the right direction. And it's so much easier. When I left that job 5 years ago, it was all their fault. And now it's not. It's just that's the way it is. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not happening to me. I'm just part of it. That's all. And it gives me a much healthier perspective because I know I can walk away if I need to,
Mm-hmm.
and it just helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Cool.
the thought pool is an important thing, and it's good to fill it with the right things and the right tools for staying sober.
All right. It looks like our comment people have come alive.
Yep.
So now we got quite a few. Let's start with, I think Meg was the first one after that. She says, when I stayed sober for 18 days, it helped me use caffeine and it was working great. It's like it replaced the alcohol with caffeine, but then it set up for failure. I was having so much. One of the things that I found, and you can toy with this, I quit caffeine entirely, with the exception of a couple of sodas, um, about 2 years ago. And I got to tell you, that was a game changer. I realized that caffeine affected my brain because I wake up like this is me without caffeine. You guys are probably like, are you sure you didn't like have an IV of caffeine before you came on? Because I'm kind of hyper and I'm kind of fast paced. And I found that getting the caffeine out of it was a big thing because then I wasn't relying on the ups and downs. When I drank, I would drink, it'd make me tired, I'd have caffeine, I'd drink again, and I was just going on a roller coaster. Then when I got sober, I was the caffeine in the morning to wake up, but I was getting a lot of sleep. I slept like 8-9 hours a day when I got sober. Really mellow life, just concentrating on being sober.
Yep.
So I would look into that and watch how caffeine affects you. Like have it if you have it in the morning and watch, right? Instead of being the thinker, just pan back and watch and be like, wow, okay, I'm watching how this affects my thoughts. Instead of fighting them, I'm now just watching it. And I find that kind of helps me. I think, Terry, you still have coffee and stuff. Yeah.
I do still have coffee, but I was going to ask you a question about what you notice without caffeine, and that's do you notice that life is that you're just kind of more even, right? You don't
Yes.
have
And,
those
and
ups and downs.
clear. Like
Right.
everything's clear. And I'll tell you one thing. If I have bad thoughts and I'm having trouble with them and I have caffeine, it's almost a guaranteed panic attack.
I
That
see.
you just, boom, it's going to throw you right into it. If I have something sad and I drink, I'm going to be a blubbering sad guy by the end of the day. So we got to watch how that affects us. And we also got to give ourselves some credit. Like the guy who said he has energy drinks, or Meg, if you had caffeine, be like, yeah, I had a cup of coffee. That's why my thoughts are this way. And understanding it is very, very important. Kind of like we have bears here in Florida, and we actually had a panther in Florida. And bears are scary, but panthers are really scary. And so there was a panther up here, and he was looking at me through the screen, which in Florida you have the illusion that a screen is actually going to protect you from things. It doesn't. And so this panther's out there, and I noticed my
We
heart rate
just
goes up.
lost audio.
Up, did we lose all audio, or are we good?
Oh no, you're kind of coming in and out.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. If it goes again, let me know. I'll just switch the battery. But I noticed that my heart started racing. I started looking around and looking for things that were going to get me, even though the panther was like right there. It's like, that's what's going to get you, not the leaf. And your mind starts to work different based on these things. And, caffeine can definitely affect that. You want to take a couple of these?
I'm sure I was looking for something else that Megan was saying about the caffeine. How you? Oh, there it is. It was just two down, and it was about caffeine pills, and then it wasn't working anymore. And I had so much caffeine that I needed something to calm me back down, and my mind immediately knew alcohol would solve that. And the reason I just wanted to stay on that just a little bit longer is, well, first of all, that's an important thing to look at, and definitely considering stopping caffeine. That's probably what I would think of doing. One thing when I did get sober and I went to rehab, as far as quitting alcohol, and I was smoking cigarettes, and then when I after rehab, I went to AA rooms, and the doctors had told me you need to quit everything right now, and all the AA people said quit drinking. That's it. Worry about that. Now I'm not telling you we're not doctors, but
Mm-hmm.
my what I was successful with was concentrating on the alcohol first. That was what worked for me, and then I worried about the cigarettes later, and still do a little bit of nicotine here and there, but that's what was helping me.
I would add to that also pick your battles based on how it affects your life.
Yep.
So, caffeine is clearly a trigger to drink for Megan, right? I'm like, okay, I have the caffeine and then I need to wind down. For me, same thing. I mean, it was like I had morning alcohol, morning caffeine, morning alcohol. Because I had to, because the caffeine would spike me up. And I didn't realize what was going on. I didn't have any idea. I also noticed that alcohol affected my blood sugar. So when I got sober, I drank sodas. I had candy everywhere because, I'm making up for 3,000 calories of alcohol. And so my blood sugar was all out of whack. Some people said, oh, don't have that much soda or whatever. And yeah, I got a little fat, but, nothing that I couldn't drop. And even if I do, I'd rather be overweight and sober than skinny and not, because skinny and not means early grave for me. So I would just watch that and pick your battles. If caffeine is not doing good for you, find something else, maybe more sleep, maybe going to bed earlier. I know if I get the same amount of sleep, but I start at 3 in the morning and wake up at 10 versus like, whatever the alternative is, going to bed at 10, waking up at 7 or whatever. It's a whole different ballgame. Even though I got the same amount, it's totally different. So I would definitely keep an eye on that. Denise says, isn't it more like trying to validate your thoughts? Well, validate, pick up, think about anything that's paying mind to it. Anything that's not just, yep, it just went by. Because we could look at it, and I remember getting sober in the beginning. I used to get mad that I'd have thoughts about drinking. I'd be like, man, that sucks. Why am I thinking about drinking? I'm supposed to be sober. And I would pick it up and think about it. Now I'm like, well, whatever. I thought about a beer. Big deal. I saw one. Whatever. That's what's going to happen. So I think that kind of answers that. Did that? Do you have a different take on that, Terry?
No, I pretty much agree with you. Just yeah, it's like trying not to validate your thoughts. Definitely. I was reading the other comments. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
that's okay. Kane says, should we actively push negative thoughts out of our mind? No. I would just let them go, because the
Yep.
more you push, the more they're going to push back, and it's going to get into a cycle. If your mind works anything like mine, the best thing to do is just be like, all right, thought something negative. Next. Right? It kind of be like the guy who's like looking at slides. The thoughts are the slides, and you're like, my mom was mean. Next. This is the next, whatever, next. And you'll find that it'll get easier over time and you'll be able to be mellow. Like me standing here being able to mellowly, which this is mellow for me, talk to you guys is like a game changer. Like I wasn't
Right.
like this. I was a antsy, hyper, crazy person more than I am now. So if you can imagine that, that was the effect of trying to fight my thoughts.
So Jacob says, I haven't talked to my parents in 4 months because of my drinking. Then my dad messaged me saying I'm a drunk and no one wants to talk to me. That tripped me up. Was a good day too. And then later on, you say thought about it for hours. What does it mean? I know this, that's why they don't talk to me is something going on right now. I haven't had a drink in 7 days. Why didn't they just ask how I was doing? And for me, I was in somewhat similar circumstances as well. And as we've already said, I didn't worry about what the other people, why they were thinking a particular way. What I concentrated on was my sobriety and trying to show that I can stay sober and that I can have a positive impact on my family. And then when I went over and talked to them, and I didn't ask why they were not talking to me. I just asked how can I help you. And that was kind of what was successful for me.
I think also one of the things is in my sobriety, I got a real clear moment of gratitude and not gratitude,
Empathy.
empathy and understanding. Thank you.
Mhm.
Because this is going on in them too,
Yep.
right? This thought thing. So you have these thoughts here, and you're like, okay, well, their thought pool. I showed up drunk every day for 15 years. So now they got a bunch of these drunk Marcuses in their thought pool, and they see Marcus and they're like, shit, dude's probably drunk again. Can't talk to him, you know. So that's going on, and have gratitude and have understanding that what you can control is what you do. I can be sober today. I can't control who's going to think I'm sober. I remember a couple of months ago, my wife was like, "You smell like beer," and I'm like, "I haven't had a beer in almost 5 years now." And she's like, "No, you really smell like it." And we couldn't figure out what it was, and I could have easily gotten mad and said, "What the hell, man? I've been sober 5 years. You need to respect. I've been doing this for a long." Or I could just be like, "Well, I came home drunk like, quite a bit. Well, I was home drunk. I didn't come home too often. I was always home, and that's natural, right? That smell's going to trigger it because one of the things to realize is this is also triggered by things that are around you, right? My daughter hates that I smoke cigars because they remind me of my dad. She's not particularly fond of him. And that's a trigger. Someone smells beer, that's a trigger. One day I was going through to the store and someone like dropped a case of beer. And I'm like, really? I just got sober and you dropped a case of beer? Like, and I smelled it. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what's going to happen. And you just need to realize that these things happen. Vocal tone will affect the way that you think, and it'll affect what comes to mind. Smells, sounds, people who can't talk like me, those things are all going to affect you. So let's take a couple others here.
Why don't you take MN Mama, or if you want.
Okay, where did she go? Listen to
Or
Anne Grace, that one?
yeah,
I listened to Anne Grace, The Naked Mind book. We do have a review on this channel of that book. I'd been reading the book, listening to the book while I was doing normal daily chores. It seemed to speak to my unconscious mind, like it unbrainwashed me. Yeah, her book has some really good stuff in it. Definitely talks about the unbrainwashing. She talks about how we're brainwashed by culture and society being prone to drink. Right, like go watch the football game next week if you like football, and you're going to see all these beer commercials and alcohol commercials. And I guarantee if you're an alcoholic, even if you've been sober for a long time, you're going to think a little bit more about alcohol the next day. Because you'd be like, wow, alcohol means you're going to ride in on a horse and save the day if you have a beer. And it's like, never happened to me when I was drinking, but hey, works in commercials. So yeah, watch what happens and realize that this thought pool is going to come from your unconscious mind. What you put in it is what's going to affect it. And over time, you can start to change the way that you think. And this is like a whole field of science known as neuroplasticity, which is that the brain can change, right? Neurons that fire together, wire together, or something like that. And when you fire them all around drinking, you're going to start to think a lot about drinking. When you fire them all around, I don't like this person or I'm afraid, that's going to happen. So, yeah, if that's helping, definitely go through it. I would also listen to talks. I would be at the point people are at when they first get sober. I would be really vigilant about going against it, and that's kind of how I took it. I was like, man, I need to change my thoughts. I need to get everything changed so that I have a different pool to choose from rather than the normal stuff. And if that book puts more stuff in your pool, go for it.
Right on. Kane says, what stops me from having a drink is knowing that drink will lead to a blackout and then the dreaded fear of waking the next day. Who did I text? What did I say? The fear of fear. And absolutely, that's one thing that's why going to meetings and doing things like this is and hanging out with other sober people is a great thing to do because it reminds you of where you were, the negative consequences that may have happened. I have this built-in forgetter in my brain, and I will remember the times when I was sober and that I was able to do this and this, even though I was drinking almost a half gallon of vodka a day. I'll forget that the repercussions that were happening, and that's a good fear to have. It's healthy. Don't dwell on it. Dwell on what's working instead. That's what I do. But it's one of the tools.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Let's see. We got Bob. I'm new here. I witnessed a brutal murder 4 months ago and developed a sleeping disorder. Alcohol became the solution. I'm going through therapy, but it takes the smallest reason to go on a bender. Yeah, trauma is a big one. There's a review I did on a book which was called this one, The Body Keeps the Score. It's here on this channel. Watch that. I think it might help. I went through some PTSD stuff when I was drinking. Nothing like that. I never witnessed anything like that. I don't know what I'd do if I witnessed something like that. But again, what happens is when you have a traumatic event, boom, it like shocks the thought pool. And now you start thinking about this stuff all the time. And what we need to do is we need to say, hey, it's normal for me to think about that because that happened, right? If I get slapped in the face, I remember I used to get bullied a lot when I was in school, being 5 foot tall. That was like the target back then. I don't know. Kids got no bullying today, which is pretty good. I think there's some, but it's not as bad. But getting bullied a lot, you were always on guard and you'd always think about things and it would immediately shock the system. And after, you get beat for one day, you go to school the next day and you're terrified, right? And it's like you don't know what to do. It's because it's affected your thought pool. And it's put all these things in to say, watch out for that guy, watch out for this guy. That guy's going to kick you. He's going to, beat you up or whatever. And what I would do in that instance is keep going to the therapy and try to stay sober because that's going to affect you in a negative way. Drinking is never a good way to solve a thought problem because it's affecting the working of your mind, right? So it's going to affect it. And right now, the working of your mind might be trying to process this. There's certain schools of thought, like EMDR therapy is a big one, where they talk about eye movement and desensitizing to things, and acceptance. It's terrible. And it's also terrible what happened to the other person, right? And that goes again to the thing of this is what happened to me. I got my car bashed up. Well, that guy over there broke his leg in the accident, and I'm bitching about a car that's a piece of metal that can be fixed. There's 5,000 other ones, within a square mile. And we always think about things that happen to us. And what I would do is try to expand your thinking and say, well, bad things do happen. And I accept that. And I don't need to drink over it. And sometimes thoughts are going to be uncomfortable. The other night my daughter was having an issue and she was in tears and she kept saying sorry. And I'm like, you don't need to be sorry to cry. There's nothing, I know our culture thinks that's bad, but it's really not. It's just a way of cleansing
okay.
a trauma or a thought. And it's not bad. It's not unmanly. It's not too girly. It's not whatever girls call it. It's neither here nor there. It is what it is. And this is the way that we cope and live in the world. And so many society things are put on us. You need to be this way. You got to be that way. This means that. And what happens is on top of this, it's like there's another layer, which is like duplicate this page, put another layer, and that's what society gave you. Right. And it's like now I got these things compounded. And that's why we have to sit back and relax and say, I am not the sum of my thoughts. There's a book that says, as a man thinketh, so is he. I think it's a Bible verse, which I don't think means what the book is about. I think it means, hey, what you think about is kind of what you're going to end up doing. Not so much, hey, what you think. If you think about slapping people, you're the slapper, right? That's not what it means. I think what it means is, hey, this is what's going to affect you. Like your thought pool is what's going to happen. And we can look at it and say, I am not the sum of my thoughts. I'm not what I think about all day. If I was, I'd be a bottle of booze because that's what I thought about all the time. So if I'm what I think about, that's what I'd be. So we have to look at it and say, well, these thoughts just are. This just is. I am programmed by culture. I'm programmed by my own mind, my upbringing, my thought pool. And I can just relax and say, that's the way I am programmed to it. And I could look at it and say, well, I said sorry for crying or whatever. Yeah, obviously I'm going to. My whole culture thought that. Big deal. Am I sorry? No. I just go through it. Hopefully that helps. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm rambling, but maybe it'll help.
I think you covered it well. One thing I'd add to it, with people that I've worked with that have gone through trauma in their lives, is some of them tend to not be completely open. And what I found that works for me is that I try to in traumatic events. I mean, I haven't experienced anything like what you went through, but um, what I found that works for me is just being open with everybody in my life, and especially with the therapist, and being open about the drinking and the fact that it may drive you to drinking, and that's just one more tool. You're probably already doing that, but just for anybody else, um, that's open-mindedness is what helps keep me going in the right direction as far as my thought patterns.
Exactly. Okay, let's see a couple others here. My new mindset towards alcohol is I don't have to drink anymore. Me neither. And I wake up every day grateful for that because I don't have to drink. I used to have to drink. I
Yep.
think I had to, and now I don't, which is good. Bob, you can say you're free. You can say you're free today, and you could act like you're free because we could say whatever we want, but our actions are what's going to show that it took, right? Did it take? Well, what do sober people do? Start doing that, start filling your mind with it, and you will be free. Freedom comes in realizing this is affecting the way I think. When I get my thought pool, if I have this alcohol, even if it's like a couple days old or it took me 90 days or so to get my thought process changed to where I didn't think about alcohol every single day. And you got to look at that and say, well, obviously this is what's going to happen. Obviously I'm not going to be free. I've been drinking something that's been keeping me locked up, right? And not for everyone. Some people drink just fine. But for me, that's how it works. That's how I know I need change, and that's how I know I need to be free from it. Let's see here. Take a couple others. Any standing out at you?
Well, Kane says, are you allowed to call yourself sober if you think just if you drink every second week, or is it total abstinence for a certain period of 1 year? I haven't found the rule book yet, Kane. I'm not sure about that answer, but really, sobriety for me is not just not drinking, because if I had to fight the fact that, if I had to fight my alcohol every second of every day, I certainly wouldn't call myself sober. Sobriety is just being free from the insanity that the alcoholism caused for me.
Mm,
So that would be my definition of sobriety, is being free from that insanity,
yeah, and that's really what it does. Is I would say, on that note, try it for a year, right?
right?
If you're having trouble, if it's causing negative effects in your life, try it out for a year, right? Because going back and forth and fighting, that's the working of your brain saying, I want more alcohol because I don't know how to live without it, right? Live without it and then see what happens. Say, oh, well, I'm living without it. It's okay. Obviously, go to detox, see a doctor, everything like that. But try it out for a year. Jacob, he loves coffee. Me too. Decaf. They come out with all kinds of good ones. If you go to like a Trader Joe's or a Fresh Market or something, they got all kinds. Pete's has a good decaf. Um, yeah, there's not much difference.
You're inspiring me. Maybe I'll try to stop drinking caffeine.
Just don't replace it with anything.
No, no.
Uh, okay, let's see what we got. I've seen people drink coffee while going through alcohol-induced shakes. That was me. I couldn't imagine withdrawals made my caffeine just made it way worse. MN Mama says, Bob C, you can be free. I have faith in you. I think everyone here has faith in you, Bob. You can do it. Everyone can. It's a thought thing. You just have to surrender and say, I'm going to change this. Okay, how long before you two saw the difference in your thought patterns? Major difference, like complete change, probably a year. Little change, like 3 weeks. It started changing like as soon as I stopped drinking, it started to change back. How was it for you, Terry?
Oh, I am different. When I woke up from my induced coma,
Mm-hmm.
my thought patterns were changed majorly. And that's because I was happy. I
Did
had
our
to learn a
stream
lot.
drop?
Yeah, our screen just dropped. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
But we're still, oh, there, it came
Is it
back.
back? Okay, we're
Yep.
back. I think we're
Yep.
back. Just a
So,
glitch.
yeah, I, my thought patterns, I started having a positive outlook. I remember people would tell me that it was like, don't worry, things are going to get better. And I was like, what are you talking about? Things are awesome right now.
Mm.
And they did get better. And I did learn how to deal with life and kind of learn those sobriety tools that we offer. But that part was a process. But yeah, so a little bit opposite.
Mm-hmm. I think we got to wrap up pretty soon, just in case the stream dies out again.
Okay.
Richard has a good one. He says, "What would you call yourself successful with staying sober? Lifetime, 10 years, 1 year, 1 day. If you could stay sober today, sometimes in your life, just getting through the day sober is good. Like sometimes if I have a bad day and I'm like, I didn't get any work done, I didn't do anything I wanted to do, my thought life was shit. I laid out and smoked cigars on the deck all day, um, but I was sober. That's a win. That's not a big win. I didn't hit the jackpot, but that's a win. So I think 1 day is successful staying sober, and then
Yep.
do it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, because you'll see some people who stay sober for 20 years. Terry's got a buddy who's going through that, like 17 years or something.
Hmm.
Went back to drinking. Um, he was successful all 17 years. Just so happens not now. And we got to look at that and say, okay, well, can I stay on guard? Can I watch what happened? And can I learn how
Yes.
to guard against it?
Right.
Okay, I guess we could take a few more. It seems strong, and I don't have to be out till 10:15. I live at a boarding house for veterans. You hear the same story. Not everyone drinks, though. Plenty of other issues that can develop for sure. I like the sauce, I guess. Yeah, and it does something for you. Like for a lot of us, we don't know how to calm our mind, and that's really what the root of drinking is we don't know how to calm our mind, and that helps, and then it stops helping, and we have to have more, and then we have to have more and more and more, and our thoughts get worse and worse and worse, and we need to find a way to live with new thoughts because everyone on this call had a time in your life when you were successfully living without alcohol. It might have been when you were 12 years old, but you did have a successful time in your life when you didn't deal with alcohol. So you do have the tools, you do know how to do it. You just got to revert back. And one of the things that I noticed when I got sober, and I changed my mindset, maybe they call it a spiritual awakening or whatever they want to call it. I call it a change of mindset. Um, is I kind of reverted back to the person that I used to be before I started drinking. And I was like, I like that person. I was pretty okay, which was kind of cool. Okay. You want to take Stephanie's there?
What suggestion do you have to be strong in mind when with others? It is easy when alone and no pressure triggers. I just try to be me. That's the easiest thing to do is to be me. And, sometimes I'm talking to somebody that's one of those A personalities that's very forward, and I just back off a little bit, and that's fine. I don't try to meet them, with the same type of aggression, or somebody maybe really shy, and then I try to reach out to them a little bit. I just kind of see what others are doing. I'm not a big person. I'm not a big crowd person like those back in high school with those keggers and standing around. I hated those things. I couldn't handle um, hanging out with people like that. But I just try to being me is the easiest thing to do. That's in sobriety as well.
And focus on what you want to do. You want to stay sober? That's your goal. You go to your
Yep.
thing, you see the other people. Hey, I'm staying sober. Oh, no, you got to try this pumpkin vodka or whatever the hell they got out now. No, I'm good. I'm staying sober. Do you have any regular pumpkin? I'll have that. Not that it'll be good. Not that pumpkin vodka would be good either, but to each his own. And just kind of look at it and say, this is what I'm going to do. At first, it was difficult for me because everyone knew me as the guy who always drank. Here's your beer. I'd go to the restaurant, they'd have it there. Go to family, let's make drinks. And you just gotta really focus on it and say, hey, this is what I'm gonna do. Like sobriety is your number one thing, and if you're willing to let someone else's thoughts about you staying sober affect that, it's time to fill your thought pool with like, I don't need to think about what they think. Right? They've been watching too many Super Bowls that say everyone needs to drink or they're not complete, or whatever it is they tell you. Um, but focus on that. All right, we'll take a couple others. I got like 2 minutes before I got to go, so we'll take a couple others here.
Jacob says also, I used to watch these kind of videos after a bender when I felt horrible. Now I try to practice a little preventive maintenance. You can watch these before a bender happens. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
idea.
that is definitely the best way to go about it. And believe me, we do get your comments when you watch these drunk, and sometimes they hurt. Um, but
But
yeah, you just gotta focus on that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it helped. There's some good talks you can listen to. If you do want to try a talk, I know there's one out there by this Barry Long guy about how to stop thinking. That's pretty good. You can find it on YouTube. You can find some of our other stuff about mindfulness as well. You could read the sobriety letters. If you go to talksober.com, you can read those. Also, if you like this show, want to help support what we're doing, you can go to talksober.com, click on support the show, and it's like $60 a month or something, and you get all kinds of MP3s and audios and all kinds of stuff that'll put things in your thought pool that'll help you stay sober. That we put that together for you to help you out. I think Terry's got like a bunch of PDFs he loaded up there and everything like that. And focus on it. And like Bob, if your mind won't shut down, distract it. Read a book. Or sit there and let it think. Right? You don't have to engage. You could just be like, oh, there it goes. It's thinking again. My brain's thinking. That's cool. That's what it's going to do. It even thinks when you're asleep. You're just asleep, so you don't notice it. And you just watch it go by. Say, okay, here's my mind thinking about all that shit again. All right, I'm going to stand here. It's going to be running around like a crazy person. It's like a friend of mine told me it's like the monkey. It's like the crazy monkey, and you're trying to rein him in and be like, dude, chill, sit and chill. And he's just popping up, and you're like, chill, chill. But if you're just like, well, fucking monkey runs around. That's what he does. That's cool. Go, monkey, go. I'm going to stay sober. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Go over to talksober.com. Check out the cool free stuff for you. If you want to support the show, support what we're doing, click that button. We'll give you a whole bunch of cool stuff for doing that. And stay sober.
thank you, everybody.